There are moments in the dark labyrinths of human relationships when one finds oneself caught in an invisible web, one spun from the thinnest threads of longing, fear, and ancient memory. Tonight, as you gather in the silence between your thoughts, I ask you to imagine not merely a story, but a dream that walks in daylight. In this dream, two souls orbit one another in the half-light, the empath and the narcissist, bound together not only by circumstance, but by the secret architecture of the psyche, by the mysterious hand of fate that draws patterns in the sand long before our conscious feet walk upon them. Why is it that the empath, gifted or cursed with the ability to feel so deeply, cannot simply walk away from the figure whose very presence drains them of color, whose gaze is both a mirror and a mask? Why is the escape always a moment too late, a revelation that comes only after the moon has set? The answer lies not in mere psychology, but in the shadow depths where myth and memory, archetype and instinct swirl together in the cauldron of the soul. Let us begin, not with judgment, but with curiosity. The empath and the narcissist, these are not merely roles, but living archetypes, primordial forms that rise from the collective unconscious. The empath is the healer, the wounded child, the dreamer who feels the suffering of others as though it were a distant echo of their own. The narcissist, in contrast, is the king without a crown, the child who never grew beyond the pain of his own unmet needs, forever seeking validation from the world, yet unable to recognize the living souls behind the faces that surround him. You may believe that such encounters are random, that it is mere misfortune that draws these souls together. But consider for a moment that the psyche is a landscape of symbols, and that every relationship is a dialogue between your soul and the world's ancient stories. The empath is drawn to the narcissist as the moth is drawn to the flame, not because the flame promises warmth, but because in some ineffable way the flame holds the secret to the moth's longing for wholeness. It is as though the unconscious mind, ever hungry for completion, seeks its reflection in the other, even if that other is made of shadow and hunger. What is it that makes leaving so difficult? Is it love, or is it the entanglement of shadow with shadow, wound with wound? The answer is both and neither. The narcissist, by their very nature, projects a powerful aura, a gravitational pull that is not merely emotional, but archetypal to the empath, whose boundaries are as porous as the early morning mist. This aura is at once captivating and overwhelming. The narcissist offers, at first, the illusion of certainty, of love that is unconditional, radiant, all-encompassing. But beneath this mask is a void, a hunger that cannot be sated, and it is into this void that the empath's own unresolved wounds are drawn, as if by a spell. The empath, you see, is not merely a giver. They are also a seeker, and what they seek, often unconsciously, is the healing of a primordial wound, the wound of being unseen, unheard, unvalued. The narcissist, in their own tragic way, is haunted by the same wound, though it is expressed as a relentless demand to be seen, to be adored, to be fed by the energy of others. Thus, the dance begins not as a conscious choice, but as a reenactment of ancient patterns inscribed deep within the psyche, encoded in the myths that have shaped humanity for thousands of years. Imagine, if you will, a dream, a great forest, thick with shadows and trembling with unseen life. The empath walks among the trees, seeking the wounded animal, the lost child, the voice that calls for rescue. The narcissist appears as a fallen king, regal yet broken, whose wounds are masked by the glittering armor of self-importance. The empath is drawn to this figure, believing, hoping that their love, their attention will restore the lost king to wholeness. But the king's wounds are bottomless, and the deeper the empath pours their energy into this vessel, the emptier they themselves become. It is here, in the realm of symbol and story, that we see why escape is so difficult. The empath is not merely fleeing a person. They are attempting to break the spell of an archetype, to rewrite a story that has played out countless times in the secret theater of the soul. The narcissist becomes not only a partner, but a living embodiment of the empath's own shadow, the disowned aspects of the self that cry out for integration, for recognition. You may notice, as you listen to this tale, a resonance within yourself, a memory not of events, but of feelings, of patterns that recur again and again, as if you were living out a script written in invisible ink. Perhaps you have felt the weight of a gaze that promises the world, then turns cold and distant. Perhaps you have poured yourself out, drop by drop, believing that love could redeem what was broken, only to find yourself emptied and alone. This is not weakness, nor is it folly. It is the inevitable consequence of the psyche's longing for completion, for reunion with the lost parts of itself. We are not born whole, we are born in pieces, scattered across the landscape of our lives. And it is through encounter, through love and suffering, joy and loss, that we are called to gather these pieces to become what we truly are. The narcissist, then, is not merely an adversary, but a messenger, a carrier of the shadow, the guardian of the threshold that must be crossed if the empath is to reclaim their own lost power. But how does one cross this threshold? How does one awaken from the dream of healing another and instead turn inward toward the task of healing oneself? The answer lies in the symbolic act of individuation, the great journey of becoming whole. The empath must, at last, confront the shadow within the parts of themselves that long to be needed, that equate love with sacrifice, that confuse empathy with self-annihilation. It is not easy. This awakening, the narcissist, sensing the shift, might become desperate, invoking every weapon of guilt, shame, and manipulation to draw the empath back into the dance. The empath, feeling the pull of old wounds, may fear that to leave is to abandon not only the narcissist, but the part of themselves that once believed in redemption through suffering. Yet, in this moment of crisis, there is an opportunity, a crack in the shell of the old self, through which the light of consciousness can pour. The empaths, if they are willing to turn inward, to face the shadow without flinching, may begin to see that the narcissist is not the source of their suffering, but the mirror that reflects their own unhealed wounds. In this recognition lies the seed of freedom, the first step toward a life that is not defined by the hunger of others, but by the quiet power of self-awareness. Let me tell you a story, one that has repeated itself in many forms throughout history. There was once a healer who wandered the world, searching for souls to save. He poured out his heart to those in pain, believing that if he could heal enough wounds, his own pain would disappear. But no matter how many he healed, the ache within him remained. One night, in a dream, he met a wise old man who said, "You cannot fill another's cup if your own is empty. Go into the forest, and there you will find the source of your own suffering." The healer entered the forest, and in the darkness he met not a wounded stranger, but his own reflection, tired, lonely, longing to be loved. In that moment he understood. To heal another is a noble task, but to heal oneself is the foundation of all true love. This is the journey of the empath, the path that leads not away from others, but back to the self. The narcissist is the initiator, the shadow teacher who awakens the empath to the necessity of boundaries, of self-care, of the courage to say no when the world demands a yes. In the end, the only way to escape the spell is to recognize that the door was never locked. It was the story in your own mind that kept you bound. As we draw the first arc of our exploration tonight, I invite you to reflect upon your own dreams, your own stories, the patterns that have shaped your life. Who are the figures that haunt your nights, that stir your heart with longing or fear? What are the wounds that still ache, the shadows that still whisper in the dark? The journey is not one of blame or shame, but of discovery, a gradual unveiling of the self, a descent into the labyrinth that leads at last to freedom. The empath cannot leave the narcissist until it is too late, not because of weakness, but because the soul, in its wisdom, will not abandon the lesson until it has been learned. The task is not to escape, but to awaken, not to destroy the other, but to integrate the lost fragments of the self. Only then can love become what it was always meant to be, a force that liberates rather than binds, that heals rather than wounds. And so, as the night deepens and the dream unfolds, let us walk together into the shadows, trusting that on the other side we will find not the end of the story, but the beginning of our own becoming. The moment we turn from blaming the world and begin tentatively to ask what longing or blindness within ourselves keeps us tethered to those who wound us, we step across the threshold into the symbolic forest of individuation. There is a peculiar terror in this turning, for the psyche resists the unknown as fiercely as it clings to familiar pain. To the empath, leaving the narcissist is not simply a question of willpower or logic. It is a descent into the roots of the self, a confrontation with a primordial darkness where one's deepest patterns are formed. The very idea of separation evokes the fear of abandonment, of annihilation, echoes of childhood, perhaps even echoes of collective wounds stretching beyond one's own biography. This dynamic, which has ensnared countless souls in the crucible of relationship, is not a mere accident of character. It is the archetype of the wounded healer, the myth of Chiron made manifest in the mundane dramas of everyday life. The empath, believing themselves capable of mending the brokenness of others, is often blind to the emptiness within, the place that aches to be seen, held, and loved without condition. The narcissist senses this emptiness like a wolf scents vulnerability. He does not consciously choose his prey, but is drawn by the magnetic pull of his own unhealed need. Thus, two wounds meet and entwine their suffering, both a prison and an invitation. Let us look deeper still. In dreams, the narcissist might appear not as a villain, but as a powerful, charismatic figure, a king, a sorcerer, a dazzling stranger whose presence fills the room with the promise of magic. The empath, in these dreams, is often the supplicant, the servant, the child, pressing their hands against the glass, longing for recognition, for entrance into the circle of warmth. These images are not random. They are messages from the unconscious, invitations to witness the inner theater where our fate is rehearsed night after night. You may ask, why do I feel powerless in the presence of the narcissist? Why does my resolve dissolve in the glare of their attention, only to return when they withdraw? The answer is to be found in the realm of psychic possession, of projection and identification. When the empath meets the narcissist, a subtle transference occurs. The narcissist projects their own grandiosity onto the empath, who, sensitive and receptive, absorbs it like a sponge. For a brief moment, the empath is lifted up, illuminated by the borrowed light of the other's charisma, made to feel special, chosen, irreplaceable. But this light is not their own. It is a mask, and beneath it lurks the cold hunger of the shadow. This is the first intoxication, the honeymoon of the soul, where everything seems possible and the wounds of the past appear at last to be healed. But the narcissist's love is conditional, transactional. It exists only as long as the empath fulfills the role assigned to them by the other's wounded ego. The moment the empath falters, asserts a boundary, or simply asks to be seen as a person rather than a mirror, the mask slips. The narcissist's gaze grows distant, cold. The warmth vanishes, replaced by blame, criticism, or silence. The empath, desperate to recover the lost paradise, redoubles their efforts, pouring out more and more of themselves in a futile bid to restore what never truly existed. Here, the psychological dynamic becomes mystical, a reenactment of the ancient tale of Persephone descending into the underworld. The empath is abducted not by force, but by the irresistible pull of longing, the longing to heal, to be chosen, to prove one's worth through sacrifice. The narcissist, like Hades, is both captor and guide, initiating the empath into the mysteries of suffering, shadow, and eventual rebirth. But unlike Persephone, the empath's descent is not imposed by fate alone. It is chosen at some unconscious level as the only path to the hidden treasure buried deep within. Consider now the role of the shadow. The empath, so skilled at feeling the emotions of others, is often a stranger to their own rage, their own desire, their own hunger for power. These disowned aspects of the self do not disappear. They lurk in the unconscious, where they fester and grow. The narcissist, embodying everything the empath has learned to repress, becomes the carrier of these forbidden energies. Thus, the relationship is charged with a strange electricity, a fascination that is both attraction and repulsion, intimacy and threat. To leave the narcissist, the empath must reclaim the lost pieces of their own soul, must face the dragon within, and not merely the one without. What, then, is this dragon? In the language of dreams and myth, it is the sum of everything we have exiled from consciousness. Our anger, our ambition, or sexual desire, our capacity for self-assertion. The narcissist, sensing these energies in the empath, but seeing them unclaimed, instinctively moves to possess and control them. The empath, in turn, is drawn to the narcissist's display of confidence, charisma, even cruelty, sensing in it a reflection of their own disavowed strength. This mutual possession binds the two together in a dance as old as humanity itself. You may protest, but I am nothing like the narcissist. I only wish to love, to help, to heal. Yet this, too, is a mask, a persona adopted to survive a world that does not always reward gentleness or sensitivity. The truth, if you have the courage to see it, is that every light casts a shadow, and every virtue, if not grounded in consciousness, can become a vice. The empath's compassion, if untethered from self-knowledge, easily becomes martyrdom, their forgiveness an invitation to abuse, their loyalty a chain that binds them to suffering. In the alchemy of individuation, it is only by integrating the shadow that the gold of the self can be revealed. Let us return for a moment to the dream. The forest is darker now. The empath has lost their way. Every path seems to circle back to the same place, a clearing where the narcissist waits. Arms open, smile gleaming. The empath wants to run, but their feet are rooted to the earth. Their heart aches with guilt. fear, longing. In this moment of paralysis, the unconscious is inviting the empath to see what is truly holding them captive, not the power of the narcissist, but the power of their own story, the myth they have lived since childhood, perhaps even before, that love must be earned through suffering, that salvation lies in rescuing those who cannot or will not rescue themselves. The psychic truth is this: the empath's struggle is not with the narcissist, but with the spell of their own beliefs. To break this spell is not an act of violence or flight, but a slow, patient turning inward, a willingness to witness without judgment the needs, fears, and dreams that drive one's own actions. It is the recognition that boundaries are not walls, but bridges, that saying no is not an act of cruelty, but of integrity. That love, which does not include the self, is a lie told by the wounded to the desperate. And so the forest begins to thin. A light appears in the distance, not blinding, but gentle, steady. The empath, emboldened by suffering, begins to move toward it, not away from the narcissist, but toward themselves. With each step, the hold of the old story weakens. The narcissist's power fades, revealed at last as a projection, a figure summoned by the empath's own unmet longing. The journey is not over indeed. It has only begun, but the spell has been broken. The empath is no longer a victim, no longer a savior, but a pilgrim on the path to wholeness. Do not mistake me. This awakening is not a simple or linear process. There will be relapses, doubts, moments of overwhelming grief and rage. The old patterns will call to you, seducing you with memories of ecstasy and terror. But each time you choose yourself, each time you listen to the whisper of your own soul rather than the demands of the other, you take one more step toward freedom, and as you do, you will find that the narcissist too is transformed, not into a lover or a friend, perhaps, but into a teacher, a symbol of the shadow, whose purpose was always to bring you back to yourself. This is the secret of the soul's journey, that what appears as punishment is often initiation, that what feels like betrayal is sometimes the gateway to awakening. The empath's pain is not meaningless. It is the crucible in which the gold of selfhood is forged. To leave the narcissist is not merely to escape suffering, but to claim one's birthright as a unique and sovereign being, capable of both love and strength, tenderness and power. Now, as you sit with these words, allow your own dreams to rise, memories, images, feelings that surface from the depths. Notice the patterns that repeat, the faces that appear again and again. What do they ask of you? What secret are they guarding? The way out of the labyrinth is not to kill the minotaur, but to listen to its story, to integrate its wisdom into the fabric of your being. There is a saying in the ancient mysteries: as above, so below, as within, so without. The narcissist and the empath are not merely players on the stage of your life. They are symbols of the eternal drama unfolding within you. The dance of shadow and light, of wound and healing, of exile and homecoming. When you embrace this truth, you discover that the door which once seemed locked was never really closed. It awaited only the turn of your own consciousness, the willingness to see and to be seen at last. Let the journey continue, not as an escape from pain, but as a movement toward wholeness, toward the sacred task of becoming who you were always meant to be. As the journey deepens, we find that the outer relationship between empath and narcissist is mirrored by an inner dialectic, a continual dialogue between what seeks the light and what clings to the darkness. It is easy, in the first pain of awakening, to cast the narcissist as a villain and the empath as a martyr. But such simplification serves only the ego's hunger for certainty. In truth, both are caught within the gravity of archetypes, far older than either person, a choreography enacted by the forces of the collective unconscious. And so, the only true freedom comes, not from judging the other, but from deciphering the symbols within one's own story in the sanctuary of the psyche, where the wild gods and wounded children dwell. Every encounter is a summons, a call to consciousness. The narcissist appears not only as a person, but as a psychic force, a threshold, guardian, at the edge of transformation. The empath's longing to heal and to be healed is not a flaw, but a relic of the sacred wound, what the ancients called the wound of the fisher king, whose suffering was the price of wisdom, whose pain was the portal to the grail. For the grail is never simply given. It is found only by those who have learned to ask the right question, to face the suffering within themselves without turning away. Imagine, if you will, a dream in which you are walking a long and winding road beneath a sky both familiar and strange. Along the way, you encounter companions, some kind, some cruel, some bearing masks, so beautiful or so terrible that you cannot look away. At times, you are tempted to linger with those who promise comfort or adventure, but the road calls you forward, always forward, into deeper layers of yourself. The narcissist may appear as a dazzling guide, a bright distraction, but soon you realize that to follow them too far is to wander into fog and thorn, to lose the thread of your own becoming. It is only when you remember your longing not for another, but for your own soul, that the path appears again beneath your feet. This path is a path of individuation. The narcissist is a gatekeeper, a force that tests your allegiance to yourself. Will you betray your own needs, your own values, for the fleeting warmth of another's approval? Or will you risk loneliness and uncertainty to become whole? The answer is not given once, but lived day after day, choice after choice, as you learn to distinguish the voice of your soul from the chorus of the world's expectations. The empath, whose gift is attunement, must learn a new skill. The skill of attuning inward, of listening for the subtle music that rises from the depths, unbidden and true. How difficult this is, how fraught with danger. For the voice of the narcissist and the shadow it carries is seductive. It speaks in the language of archetype. Without me, you are nothing. Without my gaze, you will vanish. Only in my presence do you exist. The empath, if they have not yet claimed their own reality, is drawn to this song as the sailor is drawn to the siren. The longing to be seen is as ancient as the longing to be loved. It is the longing of the soul to be recognized as real, and so the empath clings to the narcissist, not because they are blind, but because they are searching for themselves in the other's eyes. But what the empath truly seeks cannot be found in the realm of reflection. The narcissist's eyes are mirrors that distort, magnify, diminish. They offer only fleeting glimpses of selfhood, never the enduring warmth of being truly met. To remain in the narcissist's thrall is to live in a hall of mirrors, forever searching, forever lost. It is only when the empath turns away from these distorted images and dares to look inward into the shadowed halls of their own heart that healing becomes possible. This is not a gentle process. The withdrawal from the narcissist is a withdrawal from illusion, and all illusion resists dissolution. The psyche protests, grieves, bargains. It invents reasons to stay, to try once more, to hope against hope that this time will be different. Even as the rational mind catalogues the wounds and tallies, the costs, the heart aches for the fantasy of redemption, of the happy ending that was promised but never came. This is the work of mourning, the slow and sacred labor of letting go not only of the other, but of the dream that kept the pain alive. If you would understand why the empath cannot leave until it is too late, you must look here, in the field of grief, where hope and despair are tangled like vines. The narcissist is not simply an oppressor. They are the keeper of a promise. The promise that the empath's love can heal what is broken. That devotion will finally be rewarded. That suffering is a ticket to salvation. The unconscious clings to this myth with a ferocity that reason cannot match. For beneath it lies the fear that without the task of saving another, the self will dissolve into emptiness. In analysis, I have often seen this pattern. The patient who cannot leave, cannot cut the cord, cannot claim themselves until the cost has become unbearable. Only when the pain of staying exceeds the fear of leaving does the unconscious relinquish its grip. This is not weakness. It is the psyche's insistence on completing the circle, on exhausting every possibility before surrendering the quest. The ego must be defeated, not by force, but by the wisdom of suffering. Only then does the deeper self emerge, not as a conqueror, but as a survivor scarred, perhaps, but awakened. Let us examine for a moment the figure of the narcissist through the eyes of myth. In every culture, there is a story of the shapeshifter, the trickster, the one who offers gifts with one hand and takes them back with the other. Loki, coyote, Hermes, these are not simply deceivers, but catalysts of transformation. Their betrayal is an initiation, their presence a test. The empath who survives the narcissist is marked by this encounter, changed at the cellular level. They carry, henceforth, a knowledge that cannot be taught, only lived, yet the danger is great. Some are broken on this wheel, their hearts closing like flowers at night. The risk of bitterness, of cynicism, of permanent exile from one's own tenderness is real. But even here, in the ashes, the myth persists that out of death comes rebirth, that every descent is a prelude to ascent. The empath, if they can endure the dark night of the soul, emerges not as a shadow of the narcissist, but as a new creation, one who has seen the face of the monster and chosen still to love. But this love is no longer naive, no longer hungry. It is a love that begins at home in the secret garden of the self. It does not depend on another's gaze, nor does it bargain for worth. It is a love that says, I see you, shadow and all, and I see myself. In this recognition, the spell is finally broken. The narcissist loses their power. The empath is released into the mystery of their own becoming. You may ask, what is left? Then, when the dance is done, who am I without this wound? The answer is found not in words, but in the quiet confidence that arises when the soul has passed through fire and returned. You are not the sum of your suffering, nor are you the savior of the world. You are a mystery, unfolding day by day, shaped by all that you have endured and all that you have chosen. And so, as the journey continues, let the wounds speak, let the dreams unfold. Listen for the wisdom in your own longing, the guidance in your own fear. The way out is not upward, into abstraction, but downward, into embodiment, into the living flesh and blood of your unique life. The narcissist is no longer an enemy or a god. They are a messenger, bearing news from the depths. Bless them if you can, and let them go. For what matters most is not the ending, but the transformation that has occurred along the way. The empath, once captive to the dance, has become a creator, an artist of their own destiny. The shadow has been faced, the labyrinth traversed, and though the world remains full of danger and longing, you are no longer afraid. And if, in the quiet moments before sleep, the old patterns return, if the voice of the narcissist echoes in your mind, if the longing to heal or be healed rises once more, do not despair. This, too, is part of the work. The journey toward wholeness is not a straight line, but a spiral, always returning, always deepening. Each time you choose yourself, each time you honor the truth of your own soul, you move closer to the center, closer to the peace that passes understanding. Let the night come. Let the dreams rise. Somewhere beneath the surface of your waking life, the seeds of new beginnings are stirring, ready to break open and blossom in the light of your heart-won awareness. And now, as we find ourselves in the hush that follows catharsis, I invite you to linger with me at the edge of this transformation. So much of what we call suffering is, in fact, the slow work of becoming, of birthing a new relationship to oneself and to the world. The empath, who could not leave the narcissist until it was almost too late, is no longer merely a victim of fate or a servant of wounds. They are a pilgrim returning home, carrying not only scars, but also the gold unearthed from the underworld of their own psyche. What does it mean to return home when the landscape within has been so dramatically rearranged? It means to walk again through familiar rooms and recognize with a start that you yourself are changed. The patterns that once governed your loving and your leaving are softer now, the edges worn by tears, the old urgency tempered by hard-won wisdom. The world is no less mysterious, but it is no longer terrifying. What the narcissist once awakened in you, the burning hunger to be seen, the desperation to be chosen, is now recognized as your own lost longing, a call that has always belonged to you. The energy you once poured into the bottomless vessel of another's need has circled back, swelling the reservoir of your own soul. And here, the true journey begins. The challenge is no longer to flee the shadow or to rescue the broken, but to tend the living garden of the self. This is the task of individuation, the art of weaving together what was sundered, of listening for the quiet voice within that was drowned out by the din of the world. You may notice in the stillness the faint stirrings of new life, a creative impulse, a friendship rooted in mutuality, a peace that does not depend on applause or permission. These are the green shoots that emerge after the fire, proof that the psyche, like the earth, heals by cycles, by seasons, by grace. As you turn your attention inward, you may find that the narcissist lingers still at the edges of your imagination, a ghost at the feast, a leçon unfinished. This is not failure. It is the rhythm of healing. The psyche does not move by command, but by invitation, by the patient unfolding of images and emotions long denied. When the old longing returns, let it arise. Watch it with the calm gaze of a dream interpreter, curious but unafraid. Ask what wisdom it brings, what ancient need it carries, what part of you still seeks acknowledgement or redemption. Often, it is not the other you crave, but the return of some lost aspect of yourself, your power, your playfulness, your capacity for wild joy. The path forward is illuminated not by commandments, but by symbols, not by rules, but by rituals born in the crucible of experience. In the shadow of the narcissist, the empath learns the sacredness of boundaries, not as fortresses, but as thresholds where the self can meet the world without fear of annihilation, to love deeply and yet remain intact, to give freely and yet stay rooted, to see the other in their fullness without collapsing your own center. These are the fruits of the long descent and the slow return. And if you wish to cultivate this transformation, let your days become a living conversation with the unconscious. When you wake, listen for the echo of your dreams. in your solitude. Invite the silent images to speak. Notice where your energy flows toward healing others or toward nourishing yourself. When you feel the old hunger to be chosen or needed, pause and gently ask, whose voice is this? What wound is seeking balm? What might happen if I offered this love? First, to myself, do not be afraid of solitude. It is the temple of renewal. In the silence, you may find that what once felt like emptiness is spaciousness, a field where possibility grows. Here, you can encounter your own shadow, not as enemy, but as teacher, holding the keys to creativity, desire, and authentic connection. In this dialogue with yourself, you may rediscover the play of archetypes, the inner child who yearns to be held, the wise elder who counsels patience, the sovereign who claims their own authority without need for dominion. If you are faithful to this practice, not in perfection, but in honest return, you will notice that the figures who once held you captive lose their power. The narcissist becomes simply another traveler on the road, burdened by their own wounds, searching for light in the only way they know. You, meanwhile, become the steward of your own story, able to meet the world with both tenderness and discernment. Empathy is no longer a liability, but a wellspring flowing from a place that is no longer empty, but abundantly alive. And so, as I draw this evening's exploration toward its gentle close, I invite you to regard your own life with the wonder of a dreamer standing at the threshold of a new adventure. The path from enmeshment to emancipation is not a straight line, but a spiral, returning again and again to familiar lessons. Each time, with deeper wisdom, there will be setbacks, temptations to regress, moments when the old ache flares up and you fear you have made no progress at all. In these moments, breathe. Remember that the soul moves in cycles, that growth is a matter of seasons, that every return to the beginning is an opportunity for greater integration. If you wish, let the next days be a gentle experiment. Treat your feelings as honored guests, your dreams as letters from the unconscious, your patterns as stories longing to be understood. In your interactions with others, especially those who evoke the old shadows, ask quietly, what is being reflected here? What is being invited into awareness? And above all, approach yourself with a kindness you once reserved only for others. You may discover, as many before you have, that the ultimate liberation is not from the narcissist, but from the tyranny of your own unexamined longings. The empath's gift is not self-sacrifice, but self-awareness, not martyrdom, but presence. To love others without losing yourself is the great art, the fruit of the alchemical marriage between shadow and light. May you go from this place with a deeper trust in the wisdom of your own becoming, a greater reverence for the mysteries that shape us all. For in the end, every encounter, no matter how painful, is a summons to wholeness, an invitation to return home to the self, renewed and transformed. And when you feel lost, When the old patterns beckon, let your dreams guide you. Let your intuition be your compass. Let the great silence within become your sanctuary. The unconscious is a patient teacher. It waits only for your attention, your willingness to listen, your readiness to turn toward yourself with compassion and awe. This, at last, is the true work, not to escape the dance, but to awaken within it, not to conquer the shadow, but to recognize it as kin, not to wait for another to set you free, but to walk into the wilderness of your own heart and find there the light you have always sought. The journey never truly ends, for the self is infinite, unfolding in dream and memory and longing. Yet every step you take in awareness plants a seed of transformation, not only for yourself, but for the world that awaits your unique contribution. Walk gently, love deeply, and honor the mysteries, for they are the wellspring of life itself.